Hi, everyone, and welcome back for another episode of Malice in the Mitten. I'm your host, Tracy Preston, along with my bestie, Christine Mulligan. Hey, Christine.
Hey, Trace, what's going on? I have an inkling that we're going to talk about a topic that I became very passionate about when I watched the documentary. So we'll see how this goes.
Yeah, you did. So did Nina, and so did I. So here we go. Now, in continuing our series of Michigan-born killers, today we step into a story that refuses to sit comfortably in black and white. And that is Aileen Wuornos.
Before we begin, I do want to take a moment to let you know that this episode contains discussions of suicide, sexual abuse, child abandonment, violence, and murder. Some of what you're about to hear is deeply difficult and may be triggering for some listeners. Listener discretion is strongly advised.
In no way are we defending the actions that took place. But if we don't look closer, if we don't ask the harder questions, then we risk missing the warning signs in the next child who never had a chance. The press called her the damsel of death, a name that tried to make something simple out of something that was anything but. Because this story isn't just about what she did. It's about what was done to her long before anyone ever knew her name. A child is born with no ideas of right and wrong, just a plastic brain ready for impressions. And that idea, spoken over a century ago, still echoes today. Because every child is born innocent. But innocence doesn't mean protection. Some children rise above everything stacked against them. Others fall despite every advantage. And some never stood a chance. Aileen Wuornos was one of those children.
This is the part that always stops me, because we want to believe that everyone starts with the same chance. That's not right, though. That if you just make the right choices, everything will be okay. But that's not reality for everyone. Some kids are born into impossible situations. Situations where survival is the first thing they learn. Not trust, not safety, not love, nothing of that sort.
And for Aileen Wuornos, survival was the only lesson she was ever truly taught. So let's begin. Leo Pittman was born March 16, 1936, to Ellen Lorraine Pittman and Arthur Stewart Briggs. Ellen and Arthur married at some point in 1936, and since he had his mother's last name, chances are high that she was already pregnant when they married. In 1930s society, this already set him up for a rough life. He was abandoned by his parents and adopted and raised by his grandmother. A story that his children would repeat. He would spend most of his life in and out of mental institutions and prisons. He was diagnosed as a young man as schizophrenic. Diane Wuornos was born to Lori and Aileen Wuornos on August 12, 1939, in Detroit, Michigan. Her mother, Aileen, also went by Brita, which is how we will refer to her moving forward. Her father, Lori, worked at the Ford auto plant, and his wife was a stay-at-home mother, as was common for the time. Diane's early years were turbulent, as Lori was an abusive father and her mother was an alcoholic. When Diane was about 13, she and Leo Pittman met. There is no record of how the two of them became acquainted, but by the time she was just 14, she was married to the 17-year-old Pittman. During the time of their short marriage, Leo mentally and physically abused Diane. At the age of 15, she gave birth to their first child, a son. They named Keith. The following year, she became pregnant again. Now, Leo was controlling of his young wife, not allowing her to leave home while he was at work and out committing petty crimes. After being arrested for stealing a car, Leo was told he had two choices. He could either go to prison or join the army. Well, he chose the army, of course, and left for basic training in 1955. Seizing her opportunity, Diane filed for divorce. A few months after the divorce was final, she gave birth to a little girl on February 29, 1956, whom she named Aileen Wuornos. When Leo was discharged from the army, he made his way to Kansas, where he was later arrested for sexually assaulting a 7-year-old girl. While in prison for this horrific offense, he committed suicide in 1969 when his daughter Aileen was just 13 years old. She never met her father. A few years had passed when Diane decided she no longer wanted to be burdened with two small children, so she dropped them off at her parents' house and left. Keith was 5 and Aileen was only 4. They would never see their mother again. Now, some reports say Kevin was 3 and Aileen was 2. Another report says when Aileen was just 6 months old, her mother went out to dinner and never came home, instead calling her parents to tell them where to go to find and pick up the children. Diane would later claim she tried to get back into her children's lives, but her parents wouldn't let her. And Diane would remarry in 1959 and bore 2 more children. Lori and his wife Breda did formally adopt Kevin and Aileen after their mother left. Now, in a perfect world, this would have been the beginning of something wonderful for the two of them, but it isn't a perfect world. And that wasn't what happened. Lori and Breda raised Kevin and Aileen as their own, never telling them that they were adopted or that their mother had left them. Aileen didn't find this fact out until she was about 12 years old. As is often the case when adopted children find out later in life that they were adopted, this really upset Aileen's world. Now, Diane had 2 siblings, Lori and Barry, of whom Aileen believed were her siblings until she was 12 and found out that they were her aunt and uncle. Her whole life had been a lie. With adopting the children, it could be inferred that the 2 children were wanted and loved. However, nothing could be further from the truth. This was a home devoid of love. By the time Aileen was 9, she was stealing from the family and setting fires. By the time she was 11, she was selling her body for food, beer, and cigarettes. She was allegedly diagnosed with intermittent explosive disorder. Now, this disorder is characterized by recurrent, sudden episodes of impulsive, violent, or aggressive behavior disproportionate to the situation. These episodes can last up to an hour. While there is no pinpointed cause of the illness, growing up in an abusive home is thought to be a contributing factor. And make no mistake, this home was abusive. Because of Aileen's intermittent explosive disorder, other kids didn't want to be around her. She had no friends, except those that wanted what she would give them, and that was sex. They spread rumors and lies about her behind her back. They were ruthless in the way that only young kids can be to kids that are different from the norm. She was a total social outcast. Her only true friend was her brother, Keith. Now, Lori, her adoptive father, began to physically and sexually abuse Aileen at a very young age. And by the time Aileen was 14 years old, she was pregnant. She hid it the best she could, but by 6 months, she couldn't hide it anymore and told her grandparents, which were also her adoptive parents. Rumors abound as to who the father was. Some say it was a friend of her grandfather's, a product of the friend sexually assaulting Aileen in a car while bringing her home one night. Some say that it was her grandfather's baby. Other rumors state that her brother Keith was the father, but whoever's child this was, Aileen was sent to a home for unwed mothers and forced to give the baby up for adoption. The little boy she gave birth to would be the only child she would have. After she gave birth, her son was taken from her. She wasn't allowed to hold him or even look at him. Now, there was no support given to her, no therapy, no comfort for a grieving young girl who had just given birth, just abuse and vitriol. Now, this entire situation solidified her hatred of men that had been forming in her young mind for years. Now, after the birth of her son, Aileen returned home and to school. When Aileen returned to school, nothing had changed, except everything had. She wasn't just the girl who didn't fit in anymore. Now, she was the girl everyone talked about. The whispers followed her through the halls. The stares lingered a little longer. The distance between her and everyone else grew wider. Because in a place where children can be cruel, difference becomes a target. And Aileen was no longer just different. She was marked.
That's a vulnerable age to begin with. The fact that she's still a teenager and has gone through all of that already and still walking and talking coherently is amazing. Let me just say that. But then to come back after something like that, first of all, she was definitely taken advantage of one way or another, no matter who the father was, because of her age. And because of my belief that she was on the spectrum of sorts. But that's my own opinion. It means nothing. You're not just dealing with what happened and my personal belief, but you're dealing with everyone else's reactions to it. As a kid, in that time in society where that was almost the utmost, what are the neighbors gonna say? What are people gonna think? What is everyone else gonna think around you? Like, that was what everyone's biggest dilemma was, especially kids that were bullied. They felt completely alone all the time with no one to come to bat for them. Because kids can be super brutally cruel to each other. I mean, think back, we all remember, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. There's no filter with kids, no understanding, just judgment and ridicule.
Brutal judgment. There was no support waiting for her, no counselor pulling her aside, no teacher stepping in, no one asking if she was okay, because no one did. So she adapted the only way she knew how. She fought, she lashed out, and she continued doing what she had already learned to survive. Selling her body, trading pieces of herself just to get through the day.
Yeah, that's not a regular kid acting out. That's a kid who has already learned survival in the utmost. That no one's coming to help her. No one's gonna come swoop her up and be a savior, because she doesn't even know the concept of having a savior. She's She's never been shown any of that at all, as far as we're aware. And once you believe that, once you know that, everything changes. Once you know no one is coming, it's all up to you, that's all you know. That's all this child knew, was that she had to do whatever she had to do. And oh, by the way, she learned that what's between her legs and on her chest and what her hands and face can do, that was something of interest to men that could feed and clothe her. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. To men that can do something for her. So she actually was very ingenious. She learned how to use the tools at her disposal. And school just pushed her over the edge, because school was supposed to be a place of structure, of guidance, of safety, the place you go to learn how to go through life, the place you learn things that you need for your future, correct? So that's all this kid knew. And she didn't learn that. She actually was taught the exact opposite.
She was, and it's so sad. And the one place that could have helped her failed.
The school definitely failed her.
Mm-hmm. But for Aileen Wuornos, it was just another place where she was completely alone. Well, at some point, survival stops looking like adaptation and starts looking like defiance. For Aileen, that point came quietly. There wasn't a single moment, no dramatic exit, no final confrontation, just a slow unraveling until there was nothing left to hold on to. School had never been a place of safety, but now it wasn't even tolerable. The isolation, the whispers, the constant reminder of everything she had been through, it followed her everywhere. And eventually, she just stopped going. Not because she didn't care, but because there was nothing there worth staying for.
Yeah, exactly. She wasn't somebody that quit school like a lot of people that we knew and people that you hear of. They quit school because they're just giving up. They just don't want to go anymore. It's too hard. It's not that it was too hard. It sounds like she was just realizing it's just as hard there, so let me go try something else out. There's nothing there for her. She wasn't quitting, is what I'm trying to get at. She was learning how to survive and stepping away from things that did not serve her. There was no support there. She had no connection. She had no reason to keep showing up. At that point, leaving probably felt like the only control she had in the situation at all. So to say that she quit school the way that they say that she quit school because she was defiant and all of that, I don't know. I can't help myself but look at it from a completely different perspective.
Agreed. And to think of how difficult it must have been for her to go back to school just tells you how awful it was at home. She still kept showing up until she had enough. Now, without school, there was no structure left. There was no routine, no expectation, no safety net, just survival. She spent more time on the streets, more time alone, more time doing whatever it took to get through the day, selling her body, stealing, drifting, and with every passing day, the distance between her and any version of normal life grew wider, and eventually it caught up with her. The behavior, the instability, the anger that had been building for years, it couldn't stay contained. Fighting, acting out, clashing with authority, and for the first time someone stepped in, not to help her, but to contain her. Aileen Wuornos was sent to a juvenile detention center, and for a moment, it might have looked like intervention, a chance to redirect, to stabilize, but that's not what it became.
Okay, so another little rough spot about this, because this could have been the moment where someone stepped in and changed the direction of her life. Therapy, support, diagnosis, I think. Anyway, my opinion, back to someone actually seeing her. But instead, it just became another place where she was handled and not helped.
Agreed. Now, inside detention, Aileen didn't learn how to heal. She learned how to function in a harsher world. She learned control, but in a different way. How to read people, how to defend herself, how to navigate environments where vulnerability was a liability. She even learned how to play pool, a skill she would carry with her long after she left. But underneath all of it, something else was forming. Not just anger, not just pain, a pattern. Because every significant moment in her life, every violation, every betrayal had one thing in common, and that was men. The father she never met, a violent criminal, the men who abused her in the home that was supposed to protect her, the unknown father of her child tied to violence and silence, and the men who continued to use her as she tried to survive. Over time, those experiences don't stay separate, they merge. They reinforce each other until eventually it stops being about individuals and becomes about the expectation.
It shifts a little bit there again, because it's not just about what happened to her anymore. It's about what she expects is going to happen every time. And if every experience you've had tells you the same thing over and over again, that men are dangerous, that men take, that men hurt, at some point that stops feeling like fear and starts feeling like certainty. However, I don't really think that she was as big of a man-hater as when you put everything all together as it is. I honestly think that Aileen learned how to survive, and she learned the basics of what's wrong and what's right, and not in the same sense of us normies, the ones we know everything that's right from wrong because, I don't know, somehow all the supposed is. In the sense, she learned right from wrong in the most archaic of ways. And survival was the tipping point to every single man that she ended up murdering. And I'll just stop there before I get ahead of myself, and I'll hold the rest till the end. But I really don't think she was as big of a man-hater, and her trigger point was not men in general, because that's not what the pattern shows. If you look at the entirety of the pattern.
It's abuse.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Abuse was the trigger.
Abuse.
Not men.
Well, abuse by men. I mean, that's who abused her.
Unfortunately, statistically, men are more likely to abuse. But I'm sure not all of the abuse that she dealt with in school, those weren't probably all men or boys that were abusing her. Those were other girls with self-righteous judgment.
Agreed.
If they had any life experience to judge from.
Which they don't.
Exactly. But those were all girls. And I'm sure she's had a bar fight or two in her life with another woman that was mad that she was, talking to her guy. You know what I mean? So I'm sure that her abuse in her life was not all from men. And I believe in the documentary there was something where she had a relationship with another woman, and it was combative at times. So there's an instance where she lost her shit, so to speak, on another woman. So it's not like all of her violence was always directed at men. Her violence was always directed and triggered by abuse.
Agreed. Now, by the time Aileen left juvenile detention, she wasn't just surviving anymore. She was preparing for a world she believed would always hurt her first. And for years, on the highways of Florida, that belief would follow her into every car she entered. Now, after leaving the detention home, she would again return to the home she grew up in. She would again run away over and over again. Finally, Lori had had enough and told her never to return. unloved and unwanted by the people that should have cared for her the most. The young girl spent her time alone, selling her body and stealing to survive. She also spent it using drugs to cope with the rejection. In 1971, Breda died of cirrhosis of the liver. 5 years later, in March of 1976, Laurie would take his own life, just as Eileen's father had, which he did in his son Barry's garage. Grief isn't always clean. And for Aileen, it wasn't just grief. It was the loss of structure, however broken that structure may have been. Because when chaos is all you've ever known, even dysfunction can feel like something to hold on to. And just months later came another loss, one that would cut even deeper. In July of 1976, Eileen's brother Keith died of throat cancer.
That's the one, I think, because he wasn't part of the trauma in the same way. In the stories that you hear, it feels like he was her person, you know? The one connection she had that felt real. And losing that's not just grief. That's losing your anchor to reality.
Right. Now, Keith wasn't just her brother. He was her only constant. The only relationship in her life that hadn't been defined by control or abuse or betrayal. And now he was gone too.
And that's the moment where someone either finds a way forward or they fall completely. And she had nothing to catch her. But even in the documentary, that was probably the reason why she just kept moving. There was nowhere ever to go back to after that.
Right. Everything was gone. Now, after 1976, Aileen wasn't just surviving. She was untethered, drifting without connection, without direction, and without anything left to lose. She began to travel around the country, adding to her rap sheet in each new state. In 1974, she was arrested in Colorado for things such as armed robbery, auto theft, check forgery, and assault. She returned to Michigan and was arrested there, or I should say here, for assault and disturbing the peace. In 1976, she finally moved to Florida looking for a second chance. And it seemed she may have found it when she met Louis Fell. Louis was 69 years old and a retired yacht club president. Louis was driving down the road when he saw a young female hitchhiker and stopped to pick her up. That hitchhiker was 20-year-old Aileen. Not long after that fateful meeting, the pair wed. Now, Louis had money and lived in a much different world than his young bride was used to, and his expectations of what their new world together would look like soon brought trouble to the newlyweds. Her husband drank at the yacht club. She was out at the local bars getting into fistfights. Louis was absolutely horrified at his young bride's behavior, as she had never received treatment for her intermittent explosive disorder. She was still prone to violent, unprovoked attacks. A few weeks after they wed, she attacked him with his cane, although she would later claim it was he that attacked her. He filed a restraining order against her, and 9 weeks after they wed, he filed for divorce. So now, Aileen was back on her own, and at the age of 22, she attempted to commit suicide by shooting herself in the stomach, and this would be her 6th attempt. She didn't succeed and continued on with her life of crime. She was arrested under her name and under aliases multiple times for crimes such as armed robbery, passing forged checks, car theft, and various other crimes. Aileen may have continued on this path and would still be alive, a person living on the edges of society, unseen and unknown to the general public, had her path not crossed that of Tyria Moore. Now, one night at a gay bar called Zodiac in 1986, 30-year-old Aileen met 24-year-old Tyria. Tyria at the time was working as a hotel maid, originally from a conservative town in Ohio. She had moved to the more welcoming town of South Daytona and was a regular at the Zodiac. The two hit it off immediately, moving in together and becoming lovers. The pair were inseparable. Tyria continued work at the hotel, and Aileen continued to prostitute to make money. It looked like life was finally handing Aileen a chance to be happy. And after all the heartache, the betrayals, and the disappointments, she had found someone she could trust and love. Now, if you spend your childhood learning that the world is not safe, that love comes with conditions, and that your body is something people take, then what happens when you grow up? What happens when every car door that opens feels like a threat? For Aileen Wuornos, the men she met on those dark Florida highways may not have just been strangers. They may have been every man who ever hurt her. And if that's true, then the question isn't just why she killed. It's when did she stop believing she had any other choice? And then, in 1989, something changed. The bodies began to appear. The first was a man named Richard Mallory. His car was found abandoned. Then, his body, riddled with gunshots. At first, it looked like another violent crime. But Richard Mallory wasn't just a victim. He had a past, a documented history of sexual violence. Now, Aileen claimed that Richard Mallory had tried to rape her, that she shot him to survive. And here's the question that still lingers decades later. What if she was telling the truth? Because if that first killing was self-defense, then something else may have happened in that moment. Something shifted.
Because I believe that totally was true. And then in her mind, she didn't just survive that moment, she won it. Fair and square, kind of, in her mind. And that's the dangerous thing, psychologically, though. And for her, it was a snowball to this point. But when survival and violence overlap like that, it makes perfect sense to the person that it's overlapping for. We were okay. We were doing our thing. I was making a buck. He was getting his rocks off. Everything was fine. He pays me, I leave. She does this all the time. Like I know you said earlier about the dangers. She was a prostitute. I fully believe that she was well aware of what could happen. I mean, all prostitutes do. I mean, any special you've ever seen about The Point or anywhere where prostitutes go, they talk to the prostitutes and they say, well, we're aware of it. You got to be careful. You have to have a buddy system. You have to, all these things that they do that to us, the normies, we would be like, are you crazy? What are you doing that for? That's dangerous. You could die. But to the people that are doing it, they believe that they have the safety nets in place. And just like anybody else that does something crazy and irrational to a normie, you know what I mean? Someone like myself, I wouldn't climb up a mountain, and be scaling the rock walls because, hello, silly, you can die. You can fall and die. But people think they have all the rigging and their sharp shoes and their pointy gloves and they work out all the time and they believe they're going to be just fine. So likening being a prostitute, getting into a car with dangerous men is the same as if I chose to be a rock climber, climbing up rock walls 7 million feet up in the air. I know that's dramatic. I'm just trying to get the point across. She knew what she was doing. She was doing it regularly. And the problem with, I believe, someone that's on the spectrum or doesn't fully understand the normie rate of right and wrong, she did what we all believe to be wrong on a daily basis. She sold her body. Her clients were just as guilty because they were buying a body. Do you know what I'm saying? So none of her men that came to her were any more innocent than she is. I understand society doesn't see it that way, but they were partners in crime. Anyone that is a prostitute is equally in that crime with her John. So every John was equally as guilty. So the fact that when she tells the story of what happened when they were partners in crime, he got made to look like a saint, and she was also all of a sudden Satan. I do not believe any of that was actually true. And it infuriates me when we get to this part of her story, because they knew what they were doing too when they opened up their car doors.
Agreed.
At least they should have known, just like every woman knows that they should be afraid of a man. I think every man should know that they should be afraid of certain women.
And how many stories have we heard of where, these prostitutes get picked up? It's like, listen, the majority of them, yeah, there are dangerous women out there as well. But how many of these women are getting strangled and beat up and horribly raped, and these guys don't want to pay? And this happened to her multiple times.
Yep, exactly.
Right. And that's why she finally started carrying a gun. I get it. Protect yourself. After Mallory, the killings didn't stop. In 1990, David Spears was declared missing. His naked body was found in June, also shot several times. Charles Carskadden was reported missing in May of 1990. His naked body was found in June. He had been shot several times. Troy Bures was reported missing in July of 1990. In August, his body was found. He had been shot twice. Charles Humphrey's body was found in September of 1990, and unlike the others, he was fully clothed. But like the others, had been shot multiple times, and Walter Antonio's body was found in November of 1990. He was partially clothed and had been shot multiple times. Now, all 6 men confirmed dead, but one more was missing, Peter Symes. Now, he left Florida in June of 1990. His abandoned car was found in July, but his body was never found. All men who had picked Aileen up along the highway. This wasn't random. She didn't target strangers in crowds or people in positions of power. She targeted the same kind of men over and over again. Men who picked her up for sex.
I don't even really, this is my personal opinion, I don't really appreciate the fact that they say that she targeted these men. She didn't target them. They were luck of the draw, just like every other John that wanted to buy her body parts. They were the John, they were the partner in crime. She wasn't targeting them. They were actually targeting her. And when they decided to push their luck, they got a whammy. That's literally how I see it.
They got
because
the whammy.
It's not a coincidence. It's a pattern tied to something far deeper, because she wasn't just killing them. She was not recreating the scenario every time. They were the ones recreating the scenario. They were the ones with the path to death or not. They could have just picked her up, had a good time, paid her for her time, and been on their merry way. But that was not the choice that was made. And with this story, this is where my feminism rages. Because the way the story is painted, everybody's like, oh, she's an animal. She even looks like an animal. And then, of course, go straight to her looks, which, by the way, before she was beaten and battered throughout her life, she was actually a very attractive woman, physically. So that in and of itself is irony at its best. This was a pattern, but it wasn't Eileen's pattern. really. You're like, yeah, she's the one that killed them. She's the one that pulled the trigger. But they were the ones that made the pattern choice. The difference between these couple of men and the hundreds of other men that she slept with and made money from, the difference in the pattern was that they pushed the envelope to abuse.
Agreed. Now, police knew they had a killer on the loose and that the murders had to be connected. But a female serial killer was not what they had expected. Witnesses were able to place Aileen in Charles's car, and later a gun Aileen pawned was traced back to him. Aileen and Tyria were both seen abandoning Peter's car after crashing it, and Eileen's handprint was found inside. And this is where the story refuses to settle, because two things can exist at the same time. Aileen Wuornos may have been a victim, and she was also a serial killer. Those truths don't cancel each other out. When someone lives through repeated trauma, their brain adapts. Threat detection becomes constant. Fear becomes expectation. And eventually, every situation starts to feel like danger. So the question becomes, was Aileen reacting or was she anticipating?
I want to say she was anticipating just because you asked that question. Anticipating and reacting. She was anticipating because she was armed, but she was reacting only to those that pushed the envelopes. I want to go back to, you said two things can be true at the same time. I absolutely believe that. I actually think there's more than two truths at any given time, but I'm crazy, so there's that. I don't believe that one of those truths was that she was a serial killer. I do, however, believe that she was a murderous psycho. Yes, she was a murderous psycho. She didn't quite have the tools needed to know all the rights from wrong. And even in self-defense, murder is not acceptable when you're the one putting yourself in that danger zone. So I wouldn't necessarily say that she shouldn't have went to jail because this was complete self-defense, because that's arguable. If you get burnt from the stove, you don't keep putting your hand on the stove and putting yourself in that situation. So should she have been caught sooner? Yes. Should she have not killed more than once in self-defense? Yes. However, society is the one that puts us in these patterns, that she had to be in a line of work that she was in because she had no other options.
That's all she knew.
That's all she knew. And she wasn't quite ready for the world the way we should be more responsible for readying our youth for the world. But that's a whole nother can of worms. Was she a murderer? Absolutely. Should she have paid the price for murdering someone? Absolutely. But what that price was, I don't know, because the courts never hardly make any sense to me on any of that. If she was a white man and rich, she would have walked on all the counts. Let's just say it how it is. But because she was poor, that's the first thing against her. Because she was ill-educated, that's another strike. So she had a lot of strikes against her. I'm sure she would have did time had they caught her sooner. But, the pattern was in where she was doing her killings were only the people that were stepping into the lion's den.
Right. And I will disagree with you that she is a serial killer. Anything over 2, you're a serial killer. I mean, she killed 6 men.
I guess I'm saying I don't agree she was a serial killer in the sense of how we define a serial killer. The psychosis, the psychology that's behind that,
She wasn't out with a plan to kill.
Predator.
Right.
Serial killers are predatory in nature. And I don't think she was a predator in any way, shape, or form. Was she more like a trapping predator? Was she guilty of entrapment? Yeah, maybe. Was she actually hoping that every single one of these guys pushed the envelope so she can unload on them? Maybe. Then, if that was the case, maybe maybe she's got some serial killer tendencies. But without some kind of psychological link to how we have identified the meaning of a serial killer, just because you got a lot of bodies does not make you a serial killer. Just like the snipers that we employ in our armed forces, thankfully, to do what they do, they got a lot of bodies under them. We don't call them serial killers. We call them defenders.
Right. Protectors of the union.
Yeah, so I don't believe serial killer, the definition, the defining route to serial killer is not body count. Because there's a lot more people out there that have body counts that we're proud of them for.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean? So that's what I mean.
Right.
It's a slippery slope when I talk about Aileen Wuornos.
I know.
Because it sounds like I'm defending her actions. I'm not.
Right.
What I'm trying to illuminate is, what are we talking about here, fellas?
Right.
What are we talking about here? Are we talking about that they shouldn't have been punished? I don't know. I'm kind of thinking maybe all prostitutes should be given free reign. If you pass a line, you're already partner in crime. So we both know we're doing the dirty dance. We both know we're dancing a little bit in Satan's realm here. So if we're dancing in Satan's realm here, if you steal, you should lose a hand. If you try to put something where it doesn't belong, you lose the use of that something.
Right. The other thing I can't help but think about as well is it must have been for her, and again, I'm just hypothesizing because nobody knows how she felt, but I would imagine that gave her some power back, and she probably released in every killing that feeling of, fuck you, not today.
Well, yeah. Well, the thing is she never struck first. That's another thing about the serial killer thing, right? Is they strike first. Their victims are usually not trying to hurt them first.
Right.
So they
it'd be
struck
self-defense.
first. Because if any of them died behind the wheel of their vehicle, then I might buy the inkling of an idea that Aileen was out to hurt them. But instead, every single one of them were hurt outside of the car where you can easily make the deduction that they were planning to murder her.
Right.
Why would they get out of the safety of their car with a prostitute? They want to get out of their car, so in their car is no evidence of what they do to this person that they got out of the car with.
Right.
There's never going to be somebody that's going to be able to convince me that these men were just going to get a blowjob in the brush. No, sir. They were going to do something of ill intent, which is why they took her out of their car. Because if they were just going to do the deed and get off on it, they could have did that in their car. There wouldn't have been no blood involved in that. There wouldn't have been nothing but a little bit of their semen, which they could have written off as they got really wiry one day and got in the back seat and did it themselves. Do you know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Beat them and leave
They got out
them.
of their car with the idea and the intent of not wanting evidence in their car. So that, to me, right off the bat, tells me that they were going to do something very bad.
Right. Beat her and leave her.
Exactly.
Or kill her and leave her. One of the two.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. So
that's right.
There's I have, as empathetic as I am in most things all the time, I have no vein of sympathy for any of these men that passed. And I'm sorry. I don't mean to sound macabre or whatever it is I'm sounding. It's just, I don't. You get what you give.
That's right.
That's it.
I knew this was going to poke you. I knew this story was going to fire you up.
And I know that having this conversation makes me, it can make me look like a raving maniac to some people. Do I believe that she should have been in prison? Absolutely. Do I believe that she should have been made out to be a female serial killer? No, because I don't think she was. I think that she was a borderline warrior on the spectrum, is literally probably the best way for me to describe her. I believe that she was on the spectrum because of abuse and maybe because of genetics. I mean, it doesn't sound like she came from a family of rocket scientists. So genetics and an inability to get help from anywhere.
Well, she doesn't have coping skills because from being a child,
Exactly.
She was abused physically, mentally, unloved. No one gave this poor little girl, as a little girl, any love. None.
Yeah.
Horrible.
So I digress. I went off on a tangent.
That's
where
right.
we were in the conversation was you were going to try and tell me that law enforcement was starting to see the pattern in which they were deeming her as a serial killer.
That's right. So same victim profile, same outcome, and then the break. Witnesses placed Aileen with one of the victims. And like I mentioned, she pawned items traced back to her, and those had her fingerprints. Now the net was closing. So Tyria hit the road to Pennsylvania in January of 1991. January 9th, 1991, Aileen was arrested at the Last Resort Bar under an outstanding warrant for her arrest for carrying a concealed weapon. And then came the moment that would break everything. And that's Tyria Moore, the one person Aileen believed she could trust. Police found her in Pennsylvania and offered her a deal: immunity in exchange for her cooperation. And just as everyone else in her life that she trusted and loved had turned on her, Tyria did the same.
Not gonna lie, that's the part that just hurts my heart. Because after everything, she finally found someone she loves, and this is how it ends for that one. But at the same time, I mean, they were probably threatening Tyria with murder charges, I'm sure. They probably scared the hell out of her. So to put myself in Tyria's shoes, I might have did the same thing. I might have been like, well, this is what I know. You know what I mean? Because really, that's all Tyria did, if you believe the documentary that I watched, right? I mean, what else did Tyria do?
Right, I agree. I mean, Aileen was out prostituting. This girl had a job. They were lovers. Now, it doesn't mean she didn't know. Aileen told her. I mean, she was riding in the car. She was with her at the pawn shops. She knew. And that's what it comes down to, self-preservation. It's her or me. It's always going to be me.
Yeah, because the thing is, Tyria might have known. She might have told her stories. Tyria never ratted her out for nothing. But when the cops come knocking on the door and they start asking you, oh, did you know this guy got murdered and shot 6 times? And how much did you know about it? And she's like, oh, geez, I know that it was a trick. And, he tried to abuse her and she shot him. Do you know what I mean? That's not what it was. So I don't need to make that sound factual. I'm just giving it for instance.
Right.
Hey, listen, this is all I know.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right. It's
And
do you want to be
thing
in
is,
prison for the rest of your life? You want to be with her, or do you want to give her up?
Yeah, exactly. Tyria didn't have anything to do with it. So why should Tyria go down for murder? I agree with Tyria on that, even though it hurts my heart. The fucked up thing is if they were heterosexual and they got married, Tyria would never have rat out the person that she loved like that.
That's right.
Because in the normie world, if your wife commits murder and the husband knows about it, he never has to testify about it because he's our husband.
Right.
So that's another unfair thing for me. But what ifs?
Right. All right. Now, in exchange for immunity, Tyria agreed to call Aileen to get her to confess to the murders. And on January 16th, 1991, Aileen got a phone call. On the other end was Tyria. And in that moment, Aileen did something that would seal her fate. She confessed, not to the police, but to the person she loved. And I just want to say, in the documentary, this broke my heart. I mean, Aileen just was so in love with this woman. And she was like, I'll do it. I'll say it. It was me. You know what I mean? That part just really crushed my heart. You could just see the love on her face for Tyria.
Yeah, and the thing is while she was being recorded, she wasn't thinking that she was talking to law enforcement like she obviously was. She thought she was protecting someone she loved. And you just jogged my memory. She was saying things like, if it's for you, I'll tell them anything.
Right.
And that's just devastating. That's devastating that the law used her like that. But at the same time, I think the reason why I'm super, super pissed about it is that the law was using her like that. But at the same time, they were making the men victims, partners in crime, by the way, but the men victims, they were making them out to be saints.
Right.
Saints.
Right.
Like as if they weren't going to a prostitute.
Right.
Get out of here.
Get out of here.
It made me mad and sad all at the same time. I couldn't agree more.
Yeah. Now, she confessed in order to keep Tyria out of jail. She claimed all 7 men had tried to rape her and that she shot them in self-defense. Now, the trial began in 1992 for the killing of Richard Mallory. Tyria would take the stand and testify that she had no part in the murders, although she was seen leaving in a car that was stolen from one of the men and was present when the stolen items were pawned. With the evidence presented at the trial, it took 6 hours for the jury to find Aileen guilty and sentence her to death. In 1992, she would stand trial for the deaths of other men. She would get a total of 6 death sentences. She never stood trial for the death of Peter Symes, as his body was never found. Now, a woman getting a death sentence once is news. Getting 6 is huge news. Now, the case was reported everywhere, and one woman that saw the news was Arlene Prale. Arlene was a horse rancher from Levy County, Florida, and she contacted Aileen and told her that Jesus came to her in a dream and told her to take care of her. Now, although she was only 9 years older than Aileen, she and her husband adopted her in 1991 and in some ways became the mother that Aileen never had, racking up over $4,000 in phone calls alone. And she visited Aileen every week. But today, she does not even speak of their relationship. While in prison at Broward Correctional Institution, Aileen's mental health began to decline, displaying increasingly erratic and paranoid behaviors. While on death row, Aileen Wuornos lived in near isolation. She was locked in a cell for the majority of each day, with only brief moments of controlled movements. Now, we're talking 22 to 23 hours a day. Minimal contact, minimal connection, a life reduced to confinement.
Yeah, that kind of isolation, especially for someone who had already had a history of trauma, it doesn't stabilize you in any way. It amplifies every instability you have, every fear, every thought, every memory, and over time, reality itself begins to shift. Paranoia, I'm sure, is not the only thing that took hold. Every other mental instability that she had came out in full flourish, I'm sure. And I believe that isolation of 22 to 23 hours a day would do that to anyone who may believe they're sane. A couple months of that, and I'm pretty sure you'd be clinically insane.
Absolutely.
Anyway.
Absolutely. Now, she claimed her food was being tampered with and that she was being poisoned, even tortured, in ways no one else could see. Whether those fears were real or the result of a mind under pressure, they became her reality. She alternated between saying it was cold-blooded murder and self-defense that brought her to prison. And there was a question about if that may have been true. In one case, Richard Mallory, Aileen's first victim, he had been arrested and served time for assault with intent to do the R word and had a record as a sex offender, which could support her claim of self-defense in his case. But her attorneys were not allowed to bring this up at trial, which I think is just despicable. Now, would it have made a difference? The debate is still ongoing. Now, while in prison, Aileen did undergo many mental evaluations. One test she was given is called the Hiers Psychopathy Checklist, which measures 20 different traits of behavior for psychopathy traits. A person taking the test can score up to 40 points, with a minimum score of 25 to 30, putting you in the psychopathy designation. Aileen scored 32. She was also diagnosed as having antisocial personality disorder and borderline personality disorder. Now, Aileen was put to death by lethal injection on October 9th, 2002. She refused her last meal, and her final words were this: "I'd like to say I'm sailing with the rock. I'll be back like Independence Day with Jesus, June 6th, like the movie. Big mothership and all. I'll be back." Her mother, Diane, died 1 month later in November of 2002. While often called America's first female serial killer, this is not true. Aileen had plenty of company. In South Carolina in the late 1700s and early 1800s, Lavinia Fisher and her husband were hanged after being accused of murdering people that came to their inn. Between 1871 and 1873, Mother Elvira Bender, along with her daughter Kate, her husband John Sr., and son John Jr., killed at least 11 people, but probably more, when people would stop at their Kansas store and resting house. Between 1884 and 1908, Belle Guinness was active in Indiana and Illinois and is believed to have killed between 20 and 40 men, answering her ads in the Lonely Heart section of newspapers. And in California, Dorotha Puente, the killer landlady, was convicted of killing 3 of her boarders, but is believed to have killed 9. So that just goes back to your previous discussion of serial killer and why, like, these people clearly had a plan to just kill people, where that wasn't.
Exactly. That's what I mean. Like, yeah, okay, she killed a lot of people. Let's call her a serial killer. But there's something about the serial killer mentality where they were predators. I think it's the predatory nature of what I think of when I think of serial killers. I don't think that Aileen Wuornos was a predator. I think she was ready for when
it was
things
circumstantial.
happened.
Circumstantial.
Yeah, circumstantial. She was a circumstantial serial killer.
Right.
Yeah, all right.
She had the numbers.
Splitting hairs.
Right.
If you or anyone you know need help, contact the National Domestic Abuse Hotline at 800-799-7233. They are available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. 211 is available in all 50 states and parts of Canada for help with housing, food, mental health, and utility resources in your area.
So we thank you, everyone, for listening to our story today. It gets us all riled up, and it should get a lot of people riled up. It's something that should not be swept under the rug and something that we should talk about. So thank you, everyone, for listening. As always, like, share, subscribe, and comment, and give us a 5-star rating on the platform that you're listening to us on, hopefully on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Thank you, and have a great week. We will see you all back on Wednesday for Round Robin.
Bye.
Bye.